what did you do with GetSet, and how have you helped young people find, articulate, and show off the strengths? How have you done? Tell us your journey. Over
Thank
to you.
you.
I'll stop talking.
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here, and with such a diverse audience from all over the place. So welcome to you all. And yeah, as Joe described, I've been with Belbin 4.5 years, and it was a case of going, what's this thing? What nobody's using, and then sort of almost going secretly going, pick me, to kind of go and start doing something with it, which I did, and it's been such an incredible, rewarding, exciting, passionate, sometimes heads in hands journey, because there's definitely been some highs and lows. So what I'm going to just do is share my screen, everybody, just to have a look at with our journey so far. And what I'd like to talk you through today, because we don't have huge amounts of time, is some case studies and some different organisation, educational establishments we've worked with very different objectives and very different needs. But our journey, I'm going to be really honest about this. Is that okay? I'm not gonna fluff this up at all. I'm just going to say 4.5 years ago, I was scratching my head. I was really excited, and in true RI style, went steaming ahead. And then thought, God, this is really hard, because this audience isn't people at corporations or people that know Belbin. This is teachers and careers advisors who might have come across it. They might have done it at university, but they were going, Belbin, what's that? And it was a totally different audience. So we had to start really from rock bottom, scratching at the bottom there, to say, well, actually, it's all about behaviours, and it's about identifying strengths, articulating strengths. And I remember the very first meeting I had with a school, and I was petrified. And he said, well, this is very boxy, this is going to box students. And actually, it's absolutely not that. It's so not that. We were looking at these wonderful strengths these young people have, their current strengths, because obviously they will change, and teaching them and helping them, advising them to really articulate them. Because that's really hard for your average 16, 17-year-old to actually say, I am good at this, and do it in a way where they're not just saying what their mum and dad told them to say, or what everybody else is saying, the good old, I'm a good team motivator. But it's giving them this language to articulate it, to project these strengths, and to understand why they behave the way they do, and why other people around them behave the way they do, and what to do with that knowledge. How can they use that when they're doing their personal statement, writing their CV, doing a work experience application, going for a part-time job. So I have been truly honoured to be part of this journey, as frustrating as it's been at times, because sometimes you get so close to going to school and then they go, oh, no funding. We have done lots of, CSR work, corporate social responsibility, charity work, and through that we've made some fabulous connections. Some of them I know are on here today. We've got one of our enterprise advisors coming in for a quick chat later on. So over the last few years, we've been developing the reports. GetSet actually wasn't a new product, so it had been around, and Belbin had predominantly been using it in universities. But we relaunched it, we rebranded it, we made it look really funky and nice, and we had these wonderful reports that they came out as a workbook and profile. So it's still the same theory as Belbin, but it's produced very differently and looks very different to what you would have in an organisation, to what a student would receive at school. So once we'd established our product, we then started thinking how we could market it. We started to go to things like careers events, skills show. I spoke at quite a few of these, started going into schools. We did some free sessions, we started just to really get the brand known. And from that, we then started to create lesson plans, because we realised that teachers are so busy, and they don't have time to, sit and read lots of instructions, or know how, when something is so sort of new to them. So we created lesson plans. We created the Belbin All You Need pack, which comes with loads of exercises and games and resources, our lovely infographic cards on soft skills. We then looked at workshops, and one of my favourite part of my jobs is I get to go into schools and colleges and sometimes universities and run workshops, whether that's face-to-face or online. And again, it's just so wonderful to see these light bulb moments, and suddenly, when you've got the arms crossed and somebody's saying to you, I'm not good at anything, and at the end of that, they'll go, well, do you know what? I'm quite good, I've developed these amazing social skills, or I now know I can be part of a team. So it's been a really interesting journey, and there's so much more than what's here, and because we have got limited time today. But this picture you can see in front of you at the moment is actually up in Newcastle, and it was NHS apprentices. And I've put this one here because it always makes me smile, because I think they were my most difficult audience to date, where they all had their coats on still, and they all just sat there looking at me blank face for about the first hour. And then I had a panel of teachers at the back to make it even worse. But you can see by the end of it, I just love the smile on their faces and how they're interacting and coming to and playing the various games. And we did a big the objective of this workshop was really looking at their soft skills and raising self-esteem. So if it's okay, I'd like to take you through some case studies, and please do put any questions you have in the chat box. Is that a hand up or a thumb?
That was a thumb, just saying that if I look distracted,
checking.
it's because I am answering questions.
Okay, that's fine.
But, I will interrupt you the second that I get one.
I would expect nothing less.
Okay.
That's absolutely fine. So let's take you through to some different case studies, and I've chosen these three because they all had very different objectives and needs. Why is that not working, Joe? Oh, technical hitch already.
That's fine. Just
oh, there we go. I wasn't pressing hard enough. There we go. So the first one I'd like to talk to you about was a couple of years ago now, and I was invited to go and visit Wells Cathedral School all the way down in Somerset, and they are the independent schools. And all the independent schools in the Southwest come together once a year for their head boy and head girl conference. So it's really exciting. It's a big event in their annual calendar, and it's right at the beginning of the school year. So these have been nominated and then voted in. And I think at the time there was about 12 schools all coming together with different individuals, and there was also a vice head and a vice head boy and a vice head girl. So they wanted this to be particularly about leadership skills, because these were going to be, leaders for the year, representing their school year in many different events in many different ways. So it was a beautiful autumn day. I went down and I had 2 sessions. We've broken them into 2 groups. And in front of me, I had the most polished, articulate, well-dressed, well-presented 17 and 18-year-olds you can ever imagine. Now, up to this point, Belbin, I've been using Belbin mostly with really the other side of the scale, sort of students with people premium, students with confidence and self-esteem issues. So that's fine. So we started doing the session, and it's really important for me, for every workshop I do, is to kind of leave them with something, to give them some food for thought and something to think about. And halfway through this session, I was starting to panic a little bit, because I'm thinking these individuals are so good at what they do. They're so brilliant and polished. And that was all fine. And then until we started to talk about weaknesses. And suddenly these people went, oh, and started looking around each other like this. And I said, oh, who doesn't like to talk about their weaknesses? And these hands started to go up. And then it was, who's afraid of their weaknesses? And every single hand shot up in that room. And it was a real moment. I remember telling you about it, Joe, on the journey home, going, goodness, I've just had this moment. And I thought, here's where we can help them the most. So you can imagine these people that, about to go off to university or whatever they were meant to do, and they have been so successful and pushed probably in the right direction to this point. But what they hadn't had was somebody say to them, do you know what? It's okay not to be good at everything. It's okay to have weaknesses, because they are the flip side of our strengths. And it's all about being aware of them and managing them. And so when you're asked about them, you can say, yeah, I'm not so great at detail, for example, but I'm aware of that, and I bring in people who can help me, or I really, really focus for that time. So that was an interesting moment, and we had just the most wonderful day. And some people came up to me afterwards, and we had some really interesting conversations about articulating not just their strengths, but actually saying, I understand my weakness, I can manage them, I'm working on them to degree, but hey, look at these amazing strengths I have also. So that was Wells Cathedral School down in Somerset. And by the way, I actually did stay in the hotel that Hot Fuzz was filmed at, if anybody know that film. And it's exactly like it was in the film. It was quite alarming. So that was a whole experience in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you know, before we go on to the next one, Lisa, we've got a couple of questions coming in, which I think is really interesting. If we could discuss that. So,
Of course.
do you know, I love this case study, and I love it because I think nowadays, and this is a personal opinion, it's not necessarily the opinion of but I think we expect everybody to be brilliant at everything. I think there's an expectation, isn't there, that if you're slipping in a particular subject, you have coaching to be better in that subject, rather than going, well, you know, you can't be brilliant at everything. Why don't we concentrate on where you're brilliant so you can shine even more? So I think we're perhaps in this culture of not being able to admit that we can't do something. So what you gave these wonderful young people was permission, wasn't it? Permission to say, do you know, I struggle here. And that's okay, because none of us are perfect.
And I think because of perhaps they have been so successful up to a certain point, and they almost had that internal anxiety going, I can't fail, I can't fail, I can't fail. And actually, you're quite right. That's saying that's fine. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we develop as a human being. It's completely fine to fail. And if you're not, there's something wrong. You're not being truthful.
Absolutely. I really love the. There's a couple actually here I'd just like to put to you. And they're not the same questions, but they kind of are. I'll stop. Somebody said that they recently had an interview, and 2 of the questions were around weaknesses. But because they'd only been prepared to really showcase their strengths, it sort of flummoxed them a little bit. Oh God, it's hard, isn't it, to suddenly
it's really
on the
hard.
spot.
Yeah, but I would say always prepare, and we say this to them. We have these wonderful strengths cards we give out to students, and we say list your 3 strengths, but actually list those weaknesses as well, what you feel you currently have. And in an interview base, if you can turn around, don't say, oh, go bunny in headlights, say I don't have any, because again, that's not the answer they want. It's saying, well, actually, I'm not particularly great at this, but I'm aware of it, and it may have tripped me up in the past, but I've learned from that, and I now know not how to not make those mistakes. It's about showing that you can cope with that area of weaknesses and manage it effectively.
It's the learning as well in there as well, isn't it? Yes, this is a weakness, but however, I've learned it's a weakness, and I've learned to do something to position it in a more positive way. Somebody else is just saying, do we say weaknesses or areas for development? Now, I know how I feel about this, which is
I know how I know. I think we feel the same probably. So, but it is difficult, I suppose, when you're dealing with 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-olds, because their profiles, their Belbin profiles will shift a lot over the years. However, my feelings are, and I'm not saying this is scientifically proven, so I say this very carefully, I feel that even at the age of sort of 18, it is unlikely your bottom roles will ever be your top. Okay, and yes, you can spend lots of time trying to develop those weaknesses, and you might shift them up slightly on that chart. But actually, what might happen then is these wonderful strengths which you're excelling at might do this. So you go from being absolutely fabulous in some areas to actually rather mediocre in a lot. And also, if you're focusing all that time and energy on those weaknesses, that's, you know, are you going to be engaged? Are you going to, you know, you can probably do it for a few days, but if Joe said to me, actually, can you check spreadsheets and do the detail and for 3 months, I'd be sitting in a corner drinking lots of gin, I think, rocking slightly, because I couldn't cope with it, because it's not playing to my strengths at all. So I think, yes, you could possibly be aware of it, and don't use them as an excuse, because sometimes we have to work in those areas, but actually go and focus on these amazing strengths and be really spectacular at those. Do you feel, is that similar thoughts, Joe?
It is. I think very much when it comes to when you're looking at people actually in the workplace. I think sometimes we do spend an inordinate amount of time training on people to be only slightly less worse at something that they already done that, when in fact that time and resources would be better spent on making somebody's strengths even stronger, so looking more strength-based. But at the time, like you've said, you know, these are young people, and as they are young people, because Belbin measures behaviour, and behaviour is something that changes as we go through life, doesn't it? And because so many of our experiences change and whatever, I agree with Lisa. I don't think there'd be suddenly someone with bottom role complete to finish and somebody can go to top role. But I think we just need to be more aware that we don't just completely dismiss our weaknesses. I think perhaps we just need to say, look, just be aware of them, learn how to manage them, don't necessarily develop them too much, because like Lisa quite rightly said, you might be doing that to the detriment of the strength. Somebody here says that their company, they refer to them as gaps, and in our development processes, we encourage the teams to, I like this, we encourage the teams to work on these, but focus much more on the strengths as we see bigger gains. Thank you for that.
Brilliant.
I think that's wonderful.
The Belbin ethos as well, isn't it? You know, pull on your team to fill those gaps, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just as a little aside here, is the person who said earlier that they had the interview, they didn't have any weaknesses prepared, is it was okay. They managed to say, look, these are my weaknesses, but this is how I've turned it, you know, I'm very aware of them, and they got the job. So that's great news. So a bit of positivity there.
Excellent.
Right, thank you for that. But no, this case, when you came back, you were buzzing, Lisa, because it was that case of how can I help these young people who've already, you know, had so much, and yet you helped them with their weaknesses. I think that was fantastic.
Thank you. Right, let's go on to case study number 2, which is a totally different group of young people. These were year 13 apprentice engineers working at MTC, so the manufacturing technology company. Fabulous group. I remember the day very well. We are going back a couple of years ago now. It was a very cold March day. And just before Easter, I think it was, because I think we took them Easter eggs. So we went in there, and the objectives of this particular session was they were getting work ready, so that in April they had lots of interviews coming up to go into the workplace. They were very near the end of their apprenticeship. They'd done nearly 2 years, and their course leader said, we just can't seem to get the soft skills elements across, the interview skills, sort of presenting yourselves. So most of them are in their overalls every day. So just things like how to dress, how prepared to an interview. So that was a big element. And also self-awareness. So this is the only group of students from the 3 case studies I'm showing you today. Now we use the 360 observer element. So for those of you that know Belbin, obviously you have our self-perception inventory, and then most of you would then go and ask colleagues, people that know you well, to be what we call observers. So this particular group of students did observe each other, and it was really interesting. And we spent a little bit of the session discussing why that's really important, you know, to raise those self-awareness levels, to understand why the people around us that know us well might see slightly different things to what we feel we're projecting. And this can be a really positive thing. They might see you to be much more of a team player than you actually are, or have these wonderful ideas, and you're going, really, do I? Actually, yes, I do. And then suddenly the psychological side of that, you start to play to that a bit more. Also, just with doing the self-perception inventory for anybody, it can be a little bit of an echo chamber, can't it? Because it's just you reporting on yourself. So it could be that you're doing this and you're going, I'm amazing, I'm amazing, I'm amazing. Or worse, I'm rubbish, I'm rubbish, I'm rubbish. So we need somebody else to come and say, well, yeah, you know, you are really good at this bit we don't see quite so much, but we do really see this. And I can't, you know, say enough about how passionate I am about the positive effects of doing the observer feedbacks. So we did it with this team because they were 18. Generally, as a rule, we would say 16 plus for observer feedback, purely because of maturity levels. We just feel we've tried it slightly younger, and it was a bit hit and miss really, in terms of some students took it really seriously and others messed about a bit. We would say with younger people, don't ask mum and dad for observer feedback, because mum and dad tends to see the best or the worst of you, and then you'll be getting a slightly discordant report. So it's people that see you in a working or educational environment that know you well, how to see the good, the bad, the ugly. So for this team, we did the full report, and I'll be showing you a version of that report very, very shortly. And we focused very much on these lovely interview skills and soft skills. letting them understand, you know, their own strengths, the people they work with. We map them out as a team role circle. So lots of stuff you will be familiar with if you know Belbin, have attended workshops or done Belbin within your workplace. I actually did get them doing interview role play, which I didn't think I'd be able to do, but they did it really, really well. And had some wonderful, wonderful conversations about self-awareness and how to answer some of these trickier interview questions. It's one of the comments we had from that, and actually on our Belbin GetSet website we've got 2 lovely videos from this session with 2 of them giving feedback, and one of the comments was, this session helped me see how I might contribute to a team, and the Belbin GetSet workbook and workshop has given me lots of ideas for writing my CV and how I present myself in an interview. And again, authenticity is a word I use a lot with younger people. It's a bit of a buzzword, it has been for the last few years. But I think it's so important, because if you can help a 16, 17, 18-year-old understand where their current behavioural strengths lay, they are so much more likely to make the right steps, next steps going forward into the right course or the right apprenticeship, the right university degree, rather than perhaps listening to mum or dad or other views coming in. They're going to be thinking, well, actually, these behavioural strengths really suit this potential career I'm considering. Again, we don't box, we don't say you're going to be a policeman or you're going to be a midwife or you're going to be this, that and the other. It's saying, well, you're considering being a midwife, you've got strong coordinated teamwork, and that's probably some good roles to have for that particular role. Or you're considering going into sales, you know, RI is a fabulous role to have, sales and team worker as well. Again, you know, these lovely social roles coming through. I must apologise, I've got the sun. Of all the days, the sun's decided to come out and it's right on my face. I do apologise. Okay, so that was our MTC. Again, we did a 2-hour session with them. I wouldn't generally recommend doing more than 2 hours in one go, particularly online with younger people. However, I have done slightly longer, but the attention spans. And I always remember, again, the very first school I went to, and I ran a session, and she said, don't talk to them for more than 10 minutes, dear, at a time. You'll lose them. And I actually think it's the same for adults as well, because when I do workshops for adults, I'm after about 10, 15 minutes, you can see them go, woo, over here. So yeah, keep it interactive with younger people, particularly, keep it quite lively, and just try and engage with them at their level. And, you know, I think the faces say it all. They had a great time. And again, some lovely, lovely feedback from that. And they went off and had some very successful interviews.
And this is great, isn't it? Because they've been doing an apprenticeship for 2 years. They've been learning about themselves and the fact that everybody is different, but they wouldn't necessarily have the language to articulate that. But just before they're taking that next jump to their career, you've come along, introduced them to the concept of we are all different. We've all got this wonderful mixture of behaviours to try and understand where their strengths are, where other people's strengths are. And I think this is the key thing. I think this is the key thing with Belbin generally, isn't it? It's the practical side of it. It's just not a bit of theory saying I am this, I'm that. It's not. How do you then use the knowledge you have gained to be able to use that going forward? And in this case, it was to help them on that next step going into the scary world of employment. And doing it based on what their strengths are and what other people have seen their strengths are. So it's almost backed up, isn't it? It's giving you that sort of like pat on the back. It's giving you that reassuring hug that actually this is something that you potentially could really enjoy and also therefore do well at as well. So I love the fact here, and you like to say it's the observer assessments at their age group. It's so important to have them, but make sure you have it with care. I'm trying to think of the other. We've got some questions. I've taken my eye off the ball there.
That's okay. There's actually a page, a couple of pages when we go through the report, everybody, there's a couple of pages. One page I very naughtily call the copy and paste into your CV page. And I use this a lot with students, again, for that authenticity and just being honest, you know. Well,
what we'll do then, should we go straight on to the next one? So apologies if you've got questions. The answers will come up at some point. But I think a lot of these questions are going to be answered when we start going through what is it that they see, what is it that their report tells them, what does it contain?
Okay. So the final case study today, case study 3, is this is the most recent one. We actually did this between the lockdowns, believe it or not. I went over to Hemel Hempstead to work with some students at Astley Cooper School, and I've got a gentleman going to come on and speak in a moment, who's you know, a colleague and actually becoming a good friend of mine. His name is Jason Lee, and he's the CEO of an organisation, but he's also an enterprise advisor for Astley Cooper School. And he works, I think, with around 9, he'll probably correct me in a moment, about 9 different schools in the area. And he was saying, I remember the conversation saying, you know, I love Belbin, I love GetSet, what the ethos and the values of it, and I'd like to try and get it into these particular academy of schools. Now, I think it's fair to say, and Jason will come on in a second.
Actually, can I just get Jason in? Sorry, Jason, I'm just going to promote you to panelist. So you should be coming on our screen any second now. That's wonderful. So you're now a panelist, and Jason, I'm now going to make you a co-host. So it now means that you can turn your camera on, but only if you want to. And you can also turn your microphone on if you'd like to as well. But it's lovely to see you, Jason.
So this particular school, it was year 12 students. So, and these students had not quite got the exam results they needed. So generally, to go on to a level 3 course or do A levels, you need 5 GCSEs, 4 or 5 GCSEs at level 4 and above, and they hadn't quite achieved that. So in this particular course, they were doing a BTEC in advanced working skills, and they were also doing 6-month work experience with local companies. The gentleman who headed that up was a guy called Richard O'Brien, who was completely lovely and passionate. He'd actually only been working in education for the last few years, had come from industry into education. So this particular group, I spoke to Jason yesterday and I said, they're 47% pupil premium. Basically means there's a high, not a lot of social mobility, a higher sort of free school lunch. So it's kind of classed as a more perhaps deprived area. It's not a word I like using at all, but so there was a very low self-esteem, very low confidence levels. You go in and they're sitting back and they're saying, you know, I'm not good at anything, and they're rolling their eyes at you. And I love groups like this because it's a bit of a challenge, and then I hit them. And they don't quite know what's hit them sometimes. So we go in and we really start to look at the Belbin. They've done their profiles just on the self-perception. We start to talk through, and suddenly you see those shoulders start to rise because they suddenly go, oh, I might not be particularly good at maths or history, but I've got some amazing social skills, or I'm really social. And we start to explore that and what that might mean and what that might mean for their next steps. We particularly spent some time on soft skills and employability skills and interview skills on this particular session. We played some fun games, and we did some soft skill words around the room, and they had to go and stand where they thought their strongest soft skill was, and actually then tell me why, and then where their least preferred soft skill was, and then tell me why, and then we related that all to their Belbin report. We got them working as teams a lot. You can see the pictures here. Many of you will recognise our team rocket game, which is very popular with the younger ones. Team write is very popular as well. You know, when we're writing with pen, and they're very young students, always very good at it, much better than when we do our adult courses. And they had a great time, and they suddenly started to work really effectively as a team and talk to me about their plans for the future. So that was really nice. We'd had some lovely feedback. I'm just trying to find the quote, because we had an autistic girl in there, and she was very, very shy, sort of head down a lot of the time. And she actually turned around and said, I know at the end, I know I'm much more confident than I thought, and I know now that I can actually work within a team. I had some feedback with Richard a few days later, and there was another girl who was very shy in there, and wouldn't say boo to goose, and he turned around and said, it's amazing, she's normally very shy and has seemed so much more comfortable and confident since the workshop, and had been literally bouncing around the classroom. He said to them the day after the workshop, they went on to they were doing a community sports project, and had reflected on the team working element from the workshop. And they were painting an old rundown store, I think, and making it into a youth club. And the week after, they were doing a work skills session in their BTEC class, and they'd use their GetSet profiles to help them write their practice job applications. So the nice thing from that is not just a one-off, here's a report, this is me, oh, thanks very much, or here's a workshop, great, we had a lovely time, thanks very much. It's then implementing what they've learnt and continuing to use that, whether that's applying for college, applying for jobs, using that language to talk about themselves in a positive way. Hello, Jason, are you there? Did we have technical problems?
Yeah, I went blank for a few minutes, so I heard it all okay though.
That's good. So thank you so much for coming on. So we've known each other a while now, because you did an accreditation course, you've been on a few different sessions, and then you've obviously started talking about GetSet probably a good year ago. So I just thought it'd be nice for you to come and sort of say your experiences today. You were there on this day, so sort of we had the 2 hours with the students there. So is that okay?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to explain. Just very briefly, I'm an enterprise advisor for the secondary school, and I think the government's aim is that every single school in the UK has an enterprise advisor. So I think we've got about 95% of the schools covered in Hertfordshire, which means I'm sort of closely connected with other enterprise advisors talking about the challenges that we all face linking schools with the business world. That's our main job. So I've been working with Ashley Cooper for about 4 years. And I've always felt very passionate about Belbin, and wondered whether something might come along that might join the dots up. And when I saw GetSet, it really did seem to fit the bill. I've learned a couple of things myself from the work that you did, because I was a little bit concerned about maybe some bias kicking in, but I thought with them being a younger group and a relatively disadvantaged area, whether it would be a comfortable thing to do, because by talking about strengths, there's also sort of an inference towards weaknesses and how would this all play out. And I really needn't have worried. The thing I thought that was remarkable was the sort of open-mindedness of the group, and how there was a general comfort. And I think a lot of it was down to the presentation on the day, Lisa. So I think it was the amount of information at the beginning, then the activities, and then going back to that information after, and how it all sort of fitted together whilst keeping things fairly energized, if you like. And they were a little bit quiet at the beginning, but they gradually came out of their shells. So it was a really fantastic experience. It was great to watch it play out. I know Richard was delighted. I think that the outcome is the most important thing, that there was a comfort in discussing these strengths and areas where I may not be quite so strong, to use a better phrase, and whether it was something that I needed to really work on, or whether it was something that I just needed to be aware of. And I think that's a tricky thing that's already been mentioned. So I'm sorry to waffle a bit, but
you're not waffling, it's absolutely fine. Yeah,
a really positive experience. And you know, it's just a shame with COVID, it's made it a little bit difficult to follow through. Having done the event live with the students in the class, I think it would be nice to kind of have a catch up on what they took from it at the time and revisit. So.
Jason,
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. That is fantastic. And what would you say was the, you know, if for the students who attended the workshop, you know, what was the one sort of main thing that they seemed to take away from it? Was there just one element, or I don't know, is there a whole mixture of it?
For me, I think they're within the group, within this particular group, they're not necessarily had the smoothest academic transition, if you want to call it, through secondary school. So I think there is an element of, I'm not very good at anything. You know, that's, you know, I'm not saying that they're thinking about that every minute of every day, but maybe there's the whole point of self-esteem, I think, is to focus and show examples where actually you might be a quiet one in a meeting, but you might be the one having all the great ideas. And the fact that people aren't asking you isn't necessarily their fault, isn't your fault, but we've all got to try and find a way to kind of utilize those strengths. And I think everyone left feeling that actually, hey, you know, I've got something here, I can do something here, you know, I'm not all bad. And so those that maybe were more confident became more confident further, and those that were maybe feeling low in those areas, I'd like to think that they came out with an incremental, you know, an extra mark of 10 or something like that, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Jason. I think It's true, isn't it? Sometimes it's the quiet ones, isn't it? Who just sometimes also get forgotten, don't they? And therefore, you know, sometimes we're all very extroverted in our lives, and to be able to give everybody some way of being able to articulate, so I am good at something, I am needed. Perhaps it's even the needed bit, isn't it? My contribution is needed as much as everybody else's. I mean, that's such a positive thing to be able to give young people.
Yeah, I think it provided a greater sense of logic and understanding behind a strength, as opposed to I'm good at writing, or I'm good at drawing, or I'm great with numbers, or I'm great at narrating a story, or whatever these academic things that they're used to doing in school. It is detached from school. It's how you go about things, how you approach a situation, not necessarily the outcome of the work. And I think it changed the mindset a little bit, just a little bit detached away from the normal kind of work they're doing in school. So.
No, and that's so valuable, isn't it? And hopefully what they did at the workshop is helping them through what is now this lovely learning from home situation we're on, where I think these young people need as much resilience as they can possibly have. So hopefully it's giving them a little bit more.
Thank you, Jason. That's great. I just quickly, before we move on, I'd just like to mention, I think Sue is on and Hannah are on watching this webinar, and they work for a wonderful company called Inspire Ignite. And I'm like a bit of a fan for them, because what their work they do is just so amazing. And I just want to mention very quickly, I went to Grimsby, up to Grimsby, gosh, so it must be 2 years ago now. And I watched Sue use Belbin GetSet with a group of autistic young adults, so probably arranged, I think it was about 18 to 24. And at the time I was like, goodness, they're never going to be able to do this, fill it in, etc. And it was one of the most amazing experiences. I saw these people that couldn't look you in your eye. They were quite high up the scale of autism, and Sue got them to get their GetSet reports. They'd filled it out, they'd managed to get observer feedback, and suddenly these people that couldn't look you in the eye or communicate in any way suddenly started talking quite openly about the things that their family or their friends had said about them, or the strengths that they had. And it was a real moment. It's quite early on in the GetSet journey for me, and it was a real moment. So again, thank you, Sue and Hannah, for that, because that was a good time when we realised it would work with this group of people as well. And we've used it in with, slightly sort of mild special needs people. So it can be a wonderful tool to help those communications.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And that was a question that was coming up earlier, was does it help all young people, especially people with perhaps particular needs or learning difficulties? And I think used well, and I think used with knowledge, and I think obviously
it all boils down to if they can actually fill the questionnaire in, and sometimes that means having an adult sitting next to them, not influencing their answers, but just because they have to have 10, like the normal questionnaires, Belbin questionnaires, that they have to add up to 10 on each section. So as long as they can do that, then absolutely yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Crikey, time is running away with us. Okay, so we've had 3 case studies there. We had the first one looking at head boys, head girls. The second one was looking at apprentices, and this one here, the objective was really concentrating on soft skills, etc. when working. What age group were you working with, Jason? Did I get confused with my BTEC?
It was 16, so they were year 12, so just done GCSEs. Yeah.
I'm confused. So, yeah, thank you so much for that, Jason. Thank you. You can go and get yourself a cup of tea now, because we're going to talk boring, well, not boring, it's interesting, but the stuff you already know. So I'm not being rude, but I'm just going to put you back in the audience. Is that okay?
Promoted, then demoted. Sorry.
I know, it's awful, isn't it? I just feel so guilty.
And then if that's okay, could we have the report up, Jo, please?
Yes, we can.
Now this sorry to getting you multitasking in many ways.
Hang on, just hang on a second is all I'm going to say.
My shape and patience coming through.
Gosh, I have to work with this. Please, I'd like everybody to feel sorry for me. So Jason, you're up twice. I've got to get you out twice. That's fine.
Right. It was due to the technical issues.
No, that's fine. I'm just impressed I can do this. So that's just right. Okay, so Jason is now back and is an attendee, and I'm going to share my screen because let's show you what one of these Belbin reports actually looks like. So they've completed the Belbin self-perception inventory, which we have adapted. The questions have been adapted, haven't they, Lisa, for young people?
Yeah, absolutely. The language is softened slightly as well. So although I said earlier the theory is exactly the same, that's completely true. We have changed some of the words, like for example, the observer words, and softened the language slightly. So we see here, we've got your cover page and then your 9 team role summaries. And as you can see, normal Belbin, regular Belbin uses, it's a very different look to the Belbin reports. Now on the first page here, it's how you see yourself. For those of you, if you know Belbin, you'll see who, this isn't a real person, this is somebody in the officer's profile actually. But we've got somebody here who's very driven, very direct, they're very social, they're RI, they love people, they're going to get things done, they're probably going to have lots of energy, a little bit of a Tasmanian devil running around the office or classroom. And that's followed through by that lovely plant, so that creativity coming through, the ideas, blue sky thinker. I would say that then on the next page, thank you, Joe. Sorry, you're scrolling. I'm trying to keep up. You're being impatient now. So you can see the next page is how you see yourself, and it summarises, because obviously the individual won't have much Belbin knowledge, and then they can write in this page themselves, you know, surprises. How do you think you best can show your strengths based on the paragraph above?
So this paragraph here is based just on their top 2 team roles. It's based on what they see as their main strengths. So we're talking about them to start with, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
And if we scroll down to the next page, now this report, a reminder, this is including the observer reports. So this is how others see you. So we can see that there is a bit of, not huge amount of difference. There's definitely seeing the RI and the shaper, very, very predominantly. And then we've got quite a drop here with the implementer coming through. And they're not seeing that plant and specialist as much as the individual thinks they have. And then we have a paragraph about how they see you, and then something else for the individual to write about. Do you agree? Can you think of a situation where people may have seen these behaviours?
You see, I love this page because what we want with the Belbin reports is we want them to be really positive experience, don't we? So here it's saying, well, all those observers, what do they all agree on? So these are those most commonly think words that people have ticked, and all of these wonderful positives that you're giving young people, saying, look, this is what people see. They think that you flourish when meeting with new people. You know, there's some really great stuff there. Sorry, now I'm talking too much. Over to you again.
Okay. And then we mash the 2 all together. So we have a complete picture. So we can see overall, yes, the RI and the shape is definitely very dominant there. And then a big drop. So this person's very clear about what they are and what they are not. And then we can look at the comparison between the 2 much more visually. And what we're looking there for big gaps between what the individual, the self-perception is saying on the left, and the observer responses on the right. So you can see there's a big gap between the plant, where the individual is saying, well, I'm actually think I'm quite a plant, and that nobody else is particularly seeing that. And then we can have these wonderful conversations for why perhaps you're not being able to project that at present. And then we talk about the complete picture. And do you agree with the complete picture? Is there anything you're surprised about? The next page is really talking, you know, for them to sit down and talk about their strengths. This is a really positive page in terms of what they do best, plus points, and then something to bear in mind, which is about their lower roles, things they're not showing, you know, strengths in predominantly.
I love this page.
I love this page, and this is the page I call and I shouldn't call it, I call it the copy and paste your CV, but I do, because I say to them, look, these 4 work style statements are based on the combination of your top 4 roles. So rather than saying in your cover letter, I'm a very motivated team player, which is a bit dull and boring, you've got these wonderful statements here. So actually, I like to be given responsibility in making the most of opportunities and driving things forward. How much better does that sound? So use it in your personal statement, use it in your letters for potential employers, use that language in your interview, because my goodness, you are going to come across as so authentic in the way that you're presenting yourself and confident in the way that you're presenting yourself.
Sorry, I just had one of those moments there because my eldest daughter's got her 6th form interview on Friday, and obviously she's got a GetSet, obviously. And I just suddenly thought, we haven't looked at this in preparation for Friday, so I think that's what we're going to do. So I just made mental
And
notes
my
of that.
actually my son, and again I'm a bit biased in this, but he used this for his work experience. He's now in college, but he used it in year 10 for his work experience. He wants to join the police force, and he sent his GetSet a report, because we know Cambridgeshire Police uses Belbin. He sent it in with his application, and they only had 4 places, and they had hundreds of applicants, and he got one of the places. And I'm totally convinced it's down to GetSet and his ability, obviously.
Well, is your son, Lisa?
So that's
Okay.
a really, really important page. And then we get to some juicy stuff in terms of how to handle interviews, show off those strengths, don't be afraid to talk about them. And again, we were talking about how to talk about your weaknesses, some things you might want to give some thought to if you're put on the spot.
And just to say, this isn't just generic stuff. The stuff that's written here is relating to that individual's.
Absolutely, all the weightings of the scores. Yeah. And then another point for them to write into about describing their strengths, and then a practice personal statement. So often I'll give this, if we do this throughout a workshop or on an online event, I'll give this as homework. So go and think about writing a personal statement, particularly effective for year 10s, year 11s, where they're going to have to start thinking about that, or year 13s when they're going off to university or into the world of work. Think about how they might write a cover letter or personal statement. The wonderful thing with Belbin GetSet and Belbin overall, which obviously I'm very passionate about, is it's a really, I think GetSet's a really bendy, flexible tool, and it can be used in so many different ways, which is what I love about it, whether you're using it with 15, 16-year-olds at a secondary school, or, you know, first year university students, which actually today I've had I won't say the university, but today we've had somebody booked for their what they call their Flying Start scheme. I've got another university using it with first years for a very similar thing, where it's getting to know each other and being aware of those strengths. It works really well in that environment too. Now this is just the breakdown of how you see yourself. So I say to a student, get 3 colour pens, mark your top 3 roles, and then mark where everybody else sees them. So we can see a nice pattern: shaper, shaper, second first for shaper. And again with RI, that shaper RI is very, very relevant there. And then perhaps mark with everything else, and you'll see what different people are seeing different things, because obviously different people will see different things depending on your relationship to them. And if they're not seeing what you think you are, ask them why. And this is probably my second favourite page. It's the words that come from the observer's feedback. And again, I'd say if I was doing a one-to-one coaching session with a youngster, or in a workshop, look at those top 5 words. Do they represent you? Do you agree with them? Would you use them when you're writing and talking about yourself? Are there any words slightly underneath you think should be in your top 5? And if so, how are you going to work to get them there? Are there any words that haven't got marks or very low? You think, well, actually, I think that should be my top word. Ask the questions why. Why is that not coming across? And equally, look at the ones you've got nothing for. Do you agree for it? Do you think, well, actually, I am a little bit creative. Why is that not in there? So again, it's lots of explorations. You can do some exercises around this. There's lots of different things you can do with these words in terms of interview, workshops, employability skills, soft skills, etc.
For those of you who aren't so familiar with Belbin, the observer assessments that we've been talking about is literally just a list of words, and you're meant to give 1 or 2 ticks to each of these words that you think that person shows in abundance. It shows more than the norm. You can't see who has ticked what, so we've just got the total number of ticks here, so you don't have to worry about it from that perspective. But it's a wonderful, really positive way of eliciting that feedback from your colleagues, and perhaps from your teachers as well, to get a viewpoint there. Wow, do you know, every time I go through these GetSet reports, Lisa, I remember how much juicy stuff there is in there, and how useful it is to really help young people identify, project, talk about their strengths, because they are so much more than just exam grades, aren't they? And
they really are.
They really are. They deserve something, especially now. They deserve something a little bit extra that's really going to help them get through these next.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm mum of 3, and I haven't. So I've got a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old and 13-year-old. And my 14-year-old and 17-year-old have done the Belbin. My 13-year-old I haven't yet. She's a little bit young. But they're so playing to their roles in this lockdown. It's really funny. It's been a bit of a social experiment for me, I think. But interesting that they really are. Some are much social. My middle one's a bit more sort of geeky, dare I say, and detailed. So very much playing to that. And I think you know, on a more serious note, it really can help the ones particularly who are saying I'm not good at anything and there's no self-confidence there, for them to actually be able to raise their shoulders, look up a little bit and say, well, do you know what, you are, look, because it says so here. So look what we can do about that, you know.
Thank you very much. We're almost at the end of time. I'm going to whiz through some questions. I think we've answered most of them in some sort of form, but let me just double check. Right. What is the age interval to use Belbin GetSet? Are there any recommendations or limitations, if any, for particular ages? Well, the standard age range, we say from about 15, 16, so year 10, 11, up to whenever is needed, because it can also be used very much for people who just haven't had any work experience. And there's no necessarily any upper range there. I know that some people use them a bit earlier than that, but I would say you need to have a level of maturity before you can get the full amount out of that. So really starting, I'd say, around year 10, year 11.
I have actually used it with, I mean, normally I'd say about 21, purely because the language is slightly younger, you know.
The upper age. Yeah.
However, I have used it, was it last year with Aston University for their TEDx team. So they were 24, 25, 26, but they hadn't had any work experience, and that worked absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But I think you need to be very sure and have that conversation with them.
Absolutely. And I know that we had, if anybody's been on any of these webinars before, we had Mona Gibson from the University of Aberdeen, and she uses them very much with the graduates around 21, doesn't she, 22, to really help them get used to things like strength-based questions, etc. So they really are so useful for making that next step. So yes, Claire, it could be used for students to choose their A-levels. It can just help, isn't it? All of these things, they're not a definitive, but if any bit of extra information is going to help.
Do you know what we've forgotten to mention actually quickly, Jo, is Kickstart scheme.
Oh, I've got that written down on my bit of paper.
That's okay. So I'm having lots of people approach me about the government, fairly newish government Kickstart scheme, which is for 16 to 24-year-olds, and it's going down really well there. So that's the scheme where the government's paying minimum wage for companies to take, I think it's up to 30 people. And give them work experience for a certain amount of time, and I'm getting lots of requests, and it's going down very well. Working in terms of either doing it for the recruitment of the individuals or the actual self-development while they're there. So I just want to quickly mention that.
So the government's got a scheme at the moment in the UK called Kickstart Scheme, which is helping young people basically to get them into the workplace. So so it's
young people that have sort of fallen through the cracks. They're not gone on to the further education, or they've gone and dropped out. So it's basically not in work or employment, the NEET sector. So
there might be some funding there. There could be some funding for.
Yes, it's all funded.
That would be fantastic. Right. Is the GetSet certification different than normal Belbin certification? Do you need to be?
Good question. No, you don't. And no, you don't. We don't have a separate accreditation. What I would say is it will be really helpful if you have a good understanding of Belbin. So if you've attended some sort of course, we have the practical session of Belbin, which we're running online now in the end of February and one in the end of March, which a lot of that you could convert. We are considering running one purely for GetSet. We just need to know there's going to be enough uptake for it. So slightly busy at the moment, but if you are interested, come along, perhaps look at the practical version. So it's the online version of the practical day at Belbin, where we will show you how to format a workshop and do lots of online games and stuff, because I think we're going to be online for a little bit longer yet. So have a look at that. That's on the normal Belbin website under training.
And all of this information will be on the email that we will be sending out tomorrow, with a recording of everything. We'll have links to everything that you could possibly need. So don't worry, we'll send all of that there. So when we have a question, who should they contact, or how should schools contact if they're interested in this? It's that lady there. It's Lisa Ward. Her details will be on the email that we send out. Okay, so we've done that one. So, okay, I think that is the majority there. Carol, I'm going to save your question and ask Vicky to answer that, because it's a big question, and we are now in the last seconds of the webinar. So I'll make sure that I do take a copy of that and we get an answer to you. Wow. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been great to talk about it. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody's got something from today and know a little bit more about it.
No, perfect. Okay, so the email will go out, everything will be on there, and remember, it's all about helping young people find articulate their strengths so that they really can make the best next step wherever they may be in their careers or their education. Lisa has obviously got a wealth of experience here. Just let you know on the link, if you wanted just to try one, we'll send one. It costs £20. So all of those pages of the report you'll get for, I think it's around £20. We'll send the link there. Obviously, if you are a school or you're a college or a university and you would prefer to bulk buy the Belbin GetSet, then please do talk to us because we can hopefully make it as affordable as possible for you. Because as you can see, that's what we want to do, and the passion that we have here for really helping young people. We don't really want to get that cost to get in the way. So please do talk to us and get in contact with Lisa. But thank you so much indeed for joining us. I think people are now shooting off to other meetings, Lisa, so thank you.
Lovely. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.